if we did a state of the campus? So if you're here last week, we watched a video of our lead pastor Bart giving a state of the church. This week is a little like dream come true for me to give a state of the union because I secretly have always wanted to be president for a long time. And so, but what happens in the State of the Union, if you've ever watched them, is they talk about where we've come from, where we are now, and what we see coming. And there's, like, if you Google top 10 best State of the Unions, which you all do in your spare time, the number one, they said, is probably Abraham Lincoln's in 1862, because he had just issued the Emancipation Proclamation and gave this thing about slavery can't exist in our country any longer, it has to end. That's probably one of the most significant people look back on. I looked up this list, and number 10 was actually a guy, Woodrow Wilson. He was president in the early 1900s, and he was famous because he was the first president who delivered his State of the Union in person to Congress. Before that, they wrote it and then handed it to Congress for them to read. He was also famous because he ended his State of the Union with this quote. He said, "The world has entered an age of settled peace and goodwill." And that was in December 1913, and if you know your history, 7 months later, this guy gets assassinated, and it starts World War I. And so he was incredibly wrong about what we were entering into, but he was optimistic, and that's always good if you're optimistic. So with that in my mind, that I could be really, really wrong today, we will get started. So if you want to open your Bibles, true story, we're going to be in the Gospel of Mark, chapter 11. And we're going to get there in just a minute. What I want to do first, which I thought would be really great, is our flow today is going to be exactly that. What have we seen happen? What are we doing at the moment? And then where do we feel like God is leading us for the future? And this is a really significant conversation for us as the church, but also for us particularly as a church plant. One of the key things they say when I was in the church planting residency is that the first 3 years of your church will largely dictate the culture of that church for 30 years. And so you being here right now, you participating, the worship team we have and what songs they do and what kind of attitude is up here, the people in the back, the people that serve in our welcome team, our families, even you and your participation is dictating what our church will look like for 30 years. And you've probably seen that. If you've been a part of a church that was existing, you might ask questions like, why are you doing that? And they would say, because we've done it for a long time. And sometimes that's the best answer they can give. Sometimes it's a great answer. And so this is a really important question because we're halfway through our 3 years. We're halfway through shaping the culture, largely of what this church will be. It doesn't mean it can't change, but it means it will be directed by this time. And there's 4 things when we look at what has happened so far that are really fun things to celebrate. And so I'm going to ask you to stretch yourselves a little bit. And after we go through these, if we could just be a little optimistic, like Woodrow Wilson in 1913, and applaud a little bit, because some of this stuff is really fun. I had a joy writing this sermon because it was neat to even think and pray, and like, what has God been doing? What do we see tangibly that's happening? So the first thing that we see that takes place is that we focused for the last year and a half on the weekend celebration gathering. They should have them up here bit by bit. And so all of the pieces that you see up here, the production team, all the things I just mentioned, worship, welcome, set up and tear down, where to park, how to set this up. If you've been here for any amount of time, you know we actually first set up way back there on the stage, then we turned it around up there, and then we grew a little bit, so we moved it back here. All of that was our first hope, and all of you that have served in it tirelessly have made it happen. To where now when you come in, if you're a guest, it feels somewhat comfortable. It feels like a hospitable environment where it seems like people are knowing what you do. And it hasn't been me doing all of that. It's been most of you serving in that way, focusing on this event where we say, man, when the people of God gather, it's something significant. So could we give a little hand for those people that have served in that way? It's fun. It's good. And like, you're kind of clapping for yourself, so don't clap too much because that's weird. But the second thing that we see, right, is a steady increase. And this is cool. I mean, they say healthy things grow. And if I was really crazy and messed up in the head, maybe we would grow. And maybe you're like, maybe you are messed up in the head. But last year in August, I have the number. We averaged last August 42 people per weekend. This August, we averaged 75. Which is like an 80% growth over a year, which we're not going to say this is our metric, that's the end of the sermon, keep growing, that's what we want to do. But that's good. More people are showing up. Some of you are choosing to move from across the country to come out here coincidentally for the church. Some of you are hearing about it through friends and family and all that stuff. And with that growth, there's also been an abundance of families. I don't know what it is. People ask me in the residency, like, what is your thing going to be? What's your target? And I was like, I don't know. And now all these families are showing up, and not just small families. Not like, we have one newborn child. It's like, we have 18 kids. Thanks, here they are. And then they like drop them off and then go to the store. And I'm like, no, you can't. I've thought about doing that. But it is a neat thing. But we also have other people that don't have kids. We have singles, and more people are showing up, and we're saying, okay, this is great. And however you guys have come about finding Rock Harbor, through some people have seen our signs, some people through Yelp or Google reviews or Facebook or by word of mouth, it is something to be thankful about. And so I'm going to do a little bit of this for you guys, okay? Steady growth is always good. I'm just going to be really transparent. Forcing you to clap feels awkward for me. And so thanks for doing it. That's not like my forte. So I'm like, we need to be positive. I'm going to try and like force positivity on myself. Third, I wish I had like 13 of these. And then you guys would be like, how many? Discover and develop is the last one, or the third one. So discover and develop. What I mean by this is throughout this time in the last year, we've been trying to identify you, filling out the Connect card, saying, where do you want to serve? These are our needs. What do you want? And then developing you. So we do things like Strengths Finder, or we plug you in a role and ask you how you're doing, and then try and work with you practically to make things better. And we're doing a good job of that. A lot of people are serving in the church, and we're saying, okay, this is great. We have more and more people. Let us know how you can be involved and be the church. And this is something that's happened more and more, and it's not just about the weekends either. This is a big thing of what we do, but we also have midweek stuff. We have youth that launched. We have life groups. We have a local mission, like for the city type team, where you guys are serving, and we're trying to identify what's best for you. How has God specifically gifted you? And then developing that in you. And that's great because many of you have these ideas that have never been shared before, and you're sharing them with us. And you have gifts that have never been used before, and you're like, I think this is what I could do. And you even say things like, I would love to do this, but I'm willing to do whatever. And I'm like, please, more of that attitude. So I'm going to awkwardly give another little thank you. You guys are the best. This is why I love being here. You guys just clap all the time. The fourth one is serving. This one is awesome for me because I love that we're not a church just about what we're doing in here, but we've served with our money and our time. In our last fiscal year, we gave over $15,000 away to global and local partners, and that was actually 11% of our budget. And if you ever have an idea to plant a church, know that the plan to give away 11% of your budget, not to help yourself, is not a very wise suggestion. Most people are like, why would you ever do that? Do that once you're self-sustainable. And we have support from Rock Harbor back in California, so it's not like we're doing it all on our own. But there is this thing, that's $15,000 that we could have used for a lot of things here. We could have paid some of you that were doing all the things. We could have bought different things to make the job easier. We could have done a lot of things differently with that, but we say, no, we want to do that. Not only have we given money, we've served in a handful. I had to write them all down as I was thinking about them. We served with Common Heart Kitchen, the Department of Social Services, the City of Indian Trail, Operation Christmas Child, the Union County Christmas Bureau, Light Up the Night, the Back to School Bash twice now, Indian Trail Elementary, Bright Blessings, Thanksgiving Meal Delivery. They called it the Turkey Countdown or something, Great Turkey Countdown. We're working on the name. For Charlotte, Christ Together Southeast, that's a church planning network, and Charlotte One. And so all of those things we've invested time and money into in the last year, which is absolutely a cause to applaud, right? So we did that last one. You guys. That's the last one I'm going to make you do. Because OZ knows my heart. So these things, we look at what is taken, and there's been other things that have happened, and maybe you're up here and you're like, is that all that you've done? And I'd be like, yeah, it's a lot. But you might be saying, well, there's other things that I would like to do too. There's other passions where I've been now for a year or 6 months or 3 months or 2 years serving in a way that you said that you needed, but there's other things that I would like to. So you have a sheet on your chair, and it looks like this. And the question is, what are we not doing that you're passionate or gifted in? And as we talk about the things, I would encourage you to write them down and share those with us. Let us know. Because there are, if you think right now, what are the needs in the city of Indian Trail, the greater city of Charlotte, the state of North Carolina, the country of the United States, the world, the needs and the opportunities are almost limitless. And the invitation for you as a part of this community, what have you been passionate about? What is your driving bone that you can't get rid of? Because maybe there's 10 of you that all want to do the same thing, and we say, let's do it. And maybe there's one of you and we go, we'll put it on for the future. We don't know how to do that now, but once it happens, we would love to get you involved in it. We also want to look at the Bible when we talk about what we've been doing, because this is the question I was talking with our leadership team about, like preaching the sermon, and we just said, we could do a lot of things, but if we're not finding out the answer to this question, when we read the Bible, it says, Jesus will on that day say, well done, good and faithful servant. And if we're not having God look down at us right now and say, that's exactly what I wanted you to do, thank you. Are we hearing God well? And are we obeying how we're hearing God? Because that's a really significant question. There's a lot of teachings about that, and one of them is this passage in Mark. We're going to look at Mark 11, verse 12. And this is a story that many of you know, and here's the summary of it. There's a story about a fig tree. Jesus comes to the fig tree, doesn't have fruit, and he's hungry, and he curses the fig tree. And then he goes into town, he goes to the temple, and this is one of our, maybe for me, favorite stories of Jesus. What does he do when he gets to the temple? Starts turning tables. I see him WWE style, like lifting the table, throwing it to the side. At one passage it says that he makes like a cord of whips and starts driving people out. And I'm like, yeah, Jesus, crush him, you know? And then on his way out, you see him talk about the fig tree again. And then he gives this statement that many of us have memorized. And he says, I say, if you say to this mountain, move, if you have faith in your heart, it'll be done. And we go, okay, that's really cool, but what does that really mean? And there's a lot of context. As the famous movie says, a spoonful of context makes the medicine go down. So we're going to look at that. So Mark 11, I'm taking that joke off for next time. Mark 11, verse 12. If you're new here, sorry. Who said sorry? Somebody said sorry for me. Verse 12. If you don't have a Bible, the words will be up on the screen too. And you're more than welcome to use a device or whatnot. Verse 12, it says, the next day as they were leaving Bethany, Jesus was hungry. Seeing in the distance a fig tree and leaf, he went to find out if it had any fruit. When he reached it, he found nothing but leaves. And Mark adds, because it was not the season for figs. Then he said to the tree, may no one ever eat fruit from you again. And his disciples heard him say it. So it seems harsh. Hey, it's not the season. There's no figs. Why would you curse the tree? But here's the context, is that anybody have a fig tree? Anybody ever had one? Okay, so the interesting thing with fig trees is in the Middle East at least, where this took place, it didn't take place in Indian Trail, sadly, the trees would start to show leaves sometimes early March is what they believe. And March is when they start to get leaves, and once the leaves started coming, that meant that the fruit was going to come soon. But along with the leaves, there was something called a pre-fruit. The Arabs use a slang word, and they call it taksh. It's T-A-Q-S-H. And they're the size of almonds. And if you have a fig tree in the fall or in the spring, look for them. Because what happens is these little taksh, they're about the size of little almonds. They'll be all over the tree, and they just look like little buds, almost like they're going to be flowers. And for a really important point, they're edible. And actually, peasants in the first century that didn't have enough money would go around to fig trees before they would be producing figs, and they would take these taksh and collect them and then eat them. So Jesus, follow me, finds a fig tree, sees that it's in leaf, knows that if it's a fig tree, it should have some taksh, I don't know how to pronounce it. And he goes, finds none, and then curses the tree. But this is the really, really significant point, is that if you have a fig tree that has taksh, that means that it's going to have fruit. If you go to a fig tree that doesn't have taksh, that means it's not going to have fruit. You follow me on that? Because then Jesus isn't as much cursing the tree, is he? Read what he says in 14. May no one ever eat fruit from you again. There's no taksh, so will there be fruit? No. He's basically saying, no one's ever going to eat from you again because you're dead inside. And then he basically puts it out of its misery because they come back the next day and it's already withered, which is a miraculous thing. But he's not as much cursing it as he is pronouncing what's already true. And this is where we get it confused, because then he goes to the temple and the fig tree becomes a metaphor for the temple. So he walks to the temple. Verse 15, on reaching Jerusalem, Jesus entered the temple courts and began driving out those who were buying and selling there. A lot of activity. You could call it leaves. He overturned the tables of the money changers and the benches of those selling doves and wouldn't allow anyone to carry merchandise through the temple courts, which I would say is the second miracle, right? There's probably thousands of people there right now. This is around the Jewish festival of Passover. Thousands of people in the temple court. And read 16 again. It says, and he wouldn't allow anyone to carry merchandise. Like, what was he doing? Hey, no. Don't do that. Stop. Like yelling or supernaturally preventing people from coming into the temple with merchandise. Verse 17, he continues on. And as he taught them, he said, isn't it written, my house will be called a house of prayer for all nations, but you've made it a den of robbers. The chief priests and the teachers of the law heard this, began looking for a way to kill him, for they feared him, because the whole crowd was amazed at his teaching. And when evening came, Jesus and disciples went out of the city. And here's the fig tree again. On the morning, as they went along, verse 20, they saw the fig tree withered from the roots. Peter remembered, and he's like, Rabbi, look, the fig tree you've cursed is withered. And then this is what Jesus says. Have faith in God. Truly I tell you, if anyone says to this mountain, go, throw yourself into the sea, and does not doubt in their heart, but believes that what they say will happen, it will be done for them. Because what most of us have done with this passage, I'm just going to try and empathize with you, is we read the passage about the fig tree and we're like, Jesus was hangry. That's funny. And then we see him in the temple and we're like, yeah, righteous anger, Jesus. That's why I can get angry when I watch football or something, because Jesus was angry too, you know? And then we read the passage about the fig tree again and we're like, why are you still talking about a fig tree? And then we read the verse 23 and we memorize it. Yeah, whatever you have in faith, believe it. God will move those mountains. And we make it a dogmatic prayer for whatever obstacle stands in our own pursuit of self-gratification. If I believe, and this is me when I was in middle school and high school, really had a big crush on a girl. God, I believe she is to be my girlfriend. And then this is me having faith. This is me faithing it hard. Anybody? Or whatever job. I interviewed for this job. I have faith, God, that you'll do it. And those are not bad things to pray about. Some of them could be. But the premise of this is that we misinterpret that this mountain is a metaphor, because the mountain isn't a metaphor, the fig tree is. The mountain was a literal place. And the geography of this lends to that is that they were at a fig tree. They had to walk up to the temple. Why did they have to walk up? Because the temple was on something called the Temple Mount. And then they walked down from the mountain. And with the mountain, literally in the background, Jesus says, truly I say to you, you can say to this mountain, the temple behind me, move, and if you have faith, it'll be in the ocean. It's interesting, right? And in every passage we read in Scripture, a good lesson when you teach is that there is one interpretation for a passage, and it's tricky to find it sometimes, but there are numerous applications. And the application we're going to go to today isn't the core of the interpretation. The interpretation of this is really clear, and let me make it known to you today. If you're confused about what Christianity is, there is no system of religious checks and boxes and hoops and steps that you have to obey in order to be right before God. The one thing is to have faith in God, and in the gospel we learn that that's faith in God, that He sent His Son to live perfectly, die sinlessly, and be resurrected for you. That's it. You don't need to go there, and if that's in your way of knowing God, have faith in God and it's gone. Trust it. But there's also applications of this passage, and that's what I want to look at today for us. As we talk about where we've been, awesome. We have growth. We've worshiped. We've focused on this worship gathering. We've developed people. We've identified their gifts, and we've served a bunch. But if we look at this, what is the teaching is that trees can get really, really big and have lots of leaves but have no fruit. You follow me? What's true of the fig tree in this story? It's dead on the inside. What's true of the temple? It's dead on the inside. What can be true of churches that get really, really big and do a lot of really, really cool things? They can be dead on the inside. And so we have to take an assessment and say, okay, God, so what are we doing now? And let's look at it through the lens of those 4 things. So the first thing is that I want to look at is that, so what are we doing? What are we seeking? Is it what the church is supposed to do, or do they just look like church? First, focused on our celebration gathering. So what do we do with this if we're trying to say, okay, God, what is the taksh? What is the pre-fruit to the fruit? Because maybe this isn't fruit. Maybe all the work that we did here wasn't any fruit. Maybe it was just the leaves and the branches and you serving our leaves and branches to allow us to prepare fruit. Or you're the roots that are going down into the person of Jesus as our foundation. So what is the fruit of this work or that work with production or connect or families or set up and tear down? What I believe is that you take this celebration gathering and you say that there is now an opportunity for ministry. I love the value of our worship team. Lauren shares this regularly, is that she would love for us to get to a place as a worship team that they aren't worried about how they play together, but they can worship freely. Because what happens when they're worshiping freely and not like struggling, and you can feel it if you're a musician, is that you then can worship freely and you have an opportunity to encounter the Spirit of God in a way that you wouldn't otherwise. And if that can be what our Sundays are about, who cares how well this team plays together if they're not allowing you to minister? Who cares all the details of production or connect or families or setup or whatever it might be if you don't encounter ministry when you come here on Sunday morning? So Connect, we do a percolator. There's 42 cups of water and we need a little bit more than 2 cups of coffee. And how do you use a percolator to have coffee? And how many donuts do you get? And how do you cut them? And how do you set them up? How do you turn on the TV out there and wire it so that it works? Where do you put the signs? All of those are great details to figure out. But what's the purpose of it? To create an environment where people feel welcomed and embraced, right? That's the fruit. When people show up for the first time, if it's your first time here, if you felt hospitable, if you felt like people welcomed you in and were glad to see you, it wasn't an accident. They've been working on it so that when you come in, you have an opportunity to encounter God's Spirit in a way that wrecks your life. Secondly, we said that we had focused celebration gatherings and we want to add ministering to it. We also steadily increased. If we continue in the same path, 80% by next year, that's 135 people every weekend next year. It's almost double our number today. And I go, where are the chairs going to be, But what do we do with that? Is growth the purpose? It's not. But what we're asking ourselves, maybe those are the branches when there's the rule of 70 in churches, that if you have 70 people, it doesn't feel awkward and you come into a room and we're about 70. So new people don't feel as awkward when we were a year ago and there were only 40 and you're like, people know me, I want to sit down and please don't talk to me. And maybe you're still thinking that today. You're welcome that there's about 70 people, so it feels full. But our invitation isn't just to keep growing. Our invitation is to steward the people that God's brought here. So I see you and I see your faces and I know many of your names. And our question as a leadership team is, how are we taking the people that are here that God has entrusted to us for an average of 3 years, by the way? That's the average attendance in a church. And are we stewarding those people well? Are we using their gifts for them and for the kingdom to develop them? How are we taking them in and how are we investing in them? And I just need to let you know we're doing it a lot. We just relaunched life groups. That's a way where you can go from sitting in these rows, they're somewhat angled today, and actually sit in a circle. To where you can have this head knowledge that comes in and this, for some of you, a brand new teaching about pre-fruit on figs and you're going to go check your tree when you get home. To actually have it sit into your heart and say, what does this mean for me? We also launched youth a week ago. Because we say, we have a lot of kids now. So what do we do? How are we equipping kids? And I go, we're absolutely trying to do our best to reach them on their level. We added a 4th classroom next week. Next week? 2 weeks. Sign up. 17 of you? 70 of you need to sign up. Why are we adding a 4th classroom? We aren't doing it so that we can grow. We're doing it because we've grown. And I have a 2.5-year-old daughter that's in a room with a 3-month-old. And no offense if you're the 3-month-old's parent, but she can speak full sentences, and that kid can't. And when I talk to her about Jesus, she asks me questions, and I want her to talk to other people about Jesus when she's in there. I don't want her just being entertained while somebody has their hands full of 2 newborns. So now we have a 0 to 1 classroom so that we can focus on them and pray for those kids and sing songs with them and do things that are age appropriate. And then 2 to 3-year-olds that are more advanced than a 3-month-old. And then my 4.5-year-old, I'm going to ask that he gets in the 1st grade classroom because he's advanced. I'm the pastor, so I can do that. I'm just kidding. I'm not. But that's why we want to do it. How are we stewarding the kids? How are we stewarding the band? How are we stewarding you if you're calling this place your home? We have a spiritual parenting class on Friday nights because there's so many parents or people that are going to be parents or want to be parents. We're saying, hey, welcome parents. Now come and sing the songs and do the tithe and listen to the sermons that's pretty generic. And then we're like, no, how do we develop you? Does that make sense? Because that's fruit, right? Maybe it's pre-fruit. You're like, I haven't seen it in my kids yet, or whatever. But at least it's fruit. At least we know that it's producing something. Because if not, there's another passage where Jesus gives a metaphor of this tree that isn't producing anything. And what does he say in the Bible? He says, rip it out. Throw it away. And somebody says, no, let's fertilize it. Let's dig around it. Let's get its roots deeper and give it more chances. And I go, if that's us, give us another chance. The third thing, we said that we were discovering and developing people. We're also wanting to empower those people to serve and lead. Many of you have gifts and you've shown passions, and we say, how are we allowing you to use them as the church? So right now we're in a big reorganization of our leadership structure. It started with me and Jonathan. When we moved out here, we called it a core team, and then we had a launch team around us. We added Ide when he came on as a resident. We added Lauren a few months ago, and then just about a month or 2 ago, we added Jenny and Stephanie. So there's a group of 6 people that are leading this church here locally. We have elders over us that are in Orange County as well. But we're saying, how do we do it well? Because there is this idea that they have gifts, those 6, and I need to empower them, give them opportunities to do the things that they said that they've been able to do. And we need help and grace and patience as we do it. But there's other things too where we just say, we're doing strengths finders, and that's if you've never done that, Gallup strengths finders. But then with our discipleship track, we say, well, what if we found their spiritual gifts too? And we've had people take this APEST test. And if you're in a life group, I think you're taking it this week. I just got the email from our life group's leader. And with that, we have 20 people who say that they're gifted in teaching. And I go, how are they using their gift? And are we discovering them and developing them? Yes. But now how are we empowering them? So I have a list of 4 or 5 people that I'm like, I think they could teach on a Sunday. We have youth where people can have an opportunity to be empowered to use their gift. Not only that, this is 2 hours of a 172-hour week. How are we empowering you, equipping you, if you prefer that word, developing you to see your whole 172 hours as ministry? Paul says that your life is your spiritual act of worship, not just your time on Sunday morning. That's where we want to go, because that's fruit, right? Fruit isn't, oh, you're gifted at teaching up top. Watch me do, right? I try to be hip and connect. Is that a dance? I've been practicing. Here goes. Ready? Watch. I'm just kidding. There is a, what's it called? Pilates class at the gym? And you dance? Zumba. I got invited. So if anybody wants to, I think I'd be the only dude in there. I've looked in the class, but I wouldn't? Okay. If anybody else wants to come with me, I need moral support. Where was I? Watch me do. Served. So the last thing that we look at is we served last year, and we did a lot, and it's great. And we're going to continue. We're giving away an automatic 10% of every dollar that we bring in, and then on top of that, we've budgeted about 4% of money that we bring in to give to local nonprofits. We're helping the school out with stuff. But serving is one thing, and that can be really cool, because then I can tell you all the cool things that you're doing. You're like, oh, those are so pretty. You gave so much money. What would be the next step? What would be fruit of that? is that if we partnered with the nonprofits, they love the money, don't get me wrong, and if you're a nonprofit, you're like, you give it to us. Like, I get it. And they love that we serve, but then we go, what if we actually invested more than just money and people and said, could we help you? How could we regularly be a part of what you're already doing? Because when we came here, we go, we know God's already at work in Charlotte, Indian Trail. What's already happening and how do we partner with them? And now that we're a place where we've served and we had a team of people that took this survey of all the things and we've said, okay, we want to invest in a few. So there's an organization called For Charlotte that is trying to bring together churches so that they can be the church, capital C. And they would say that a church can't meet the needs of the city, but the church absolutely can. And so I'm on a little leadership team with 5-6 other people. And we meet, and then there's a monthly gathering where churches are invited, outreach, missions people are invited. And they say, how do we pool resources? How do we make space when we do an event to invite other churches to do it so it's better and more impactful? So that 17 churches aren't all doing an individual backpack drive, so a kid gets 8 backpacks, but they get one really good backpack with all the stuff that they actually need, right? And that's one thing that we're doing. We've also identified Common Heart. They're an organization that does so many things, and we go, how can we not just serve, that's great, and we'll keep doing that, but how can we partner with them in certain ways? Or the City of Indian Trail. We're helping them this Saturday. I won't be, because we are expecting our 3rd child. I don't know if that's a good enough excuse, but I'm really nervous about it. My body has just gone through this transformation the last 9 months, so. But even the last time we did the Hop to It event, and they go, hey, you guys did the registration table last time, would you do it again? And we're like, sure. And they actually said after, they go, we don't know what we would have done had you not come. And I was like, and we could probably put a little bit of time into it and make it better and actually partner rather than just serving. And that's, I think, fruit, right? That's talks. That's us. Then the city says, oh, we're doing the Hop to It. Make sure you talk to Rock Harbor and make sure we know what they're doing because they played such a huge role. We're not just adding to it. We're helping establish an awesome city where people can do fun things and enjoy the city that they live in, right? All of that to say, there is this, warning. Because as a church, if we're not careful, we can get bigger and bigger. More people will show up. I'm a decent enough talker, and our families is safe enough, and they have cool things to do. Our welcome team has free coffee and donuts, so why not come every week? But there is this idea that as we get bigger, I was thinking about this when I was just preparing for it, is what happens when a storm comes through with dead trees? We just had Irma, kind of the tail end of it. But there were trees all over that were down. And I imagine those trees weren't the healthiest of trees. Because what happens when a conflict comes or there's a root that's exposed? You're like, oh, there's so many leaves on those trees. It's so big. But there's nothing at its core. And that's our fear. We don't want to be that. And so when you say, where are we going in the future? I say, we're going to keep doing the things that we're doing, and we're going to regularly assess, God, are you looking at us as a church and saying, good, keep doing that? Collectively, we've identified a few things. We want to be diverse. We want to be a church, not attend a church. We want to be for the city. We want to expand the kingdom. And regularly we say, God, we feel like you've led us in those. How are we doing that? Are we doing it well? Not only that, but you have individual gifts and passions. That's why you have that card. Because if in a year we find out that there were 30 of you that were really passionate about partnering with homelessness, and we didn't do anything about that, God would look down and say, I brought 30 people that all really want to do it, and you did nothing. And he'd say, we missed it. And so collectively as a church, if you call this church your home, first, thank you. It is an honor to be a pastor of this church. I love it. Look forward to Sundays so much because I get to hang out with you. But if you're a part of this church and you call it your church, you have a role to play. You have an opinion. You have gifts. You have time. If you've been serving and leading, thank you, thank you. Because the church isn't meant to be led by these entertainers that just put on a show for you. It is to be a group of people that gather together to worship. And I would just say we're expecting our 3rd child. And I would just say thank you on a personal level to how you guys have supported us as we've gone about with pregnancy and even the surprise shower And we were thinking about our plans after, and just how many, you've already wrapped your arms around us in a way that, it's probably been the most soul challenging thing we've ever done in our lives. But we look at all of you and we're just like, but there's so many people that are in our corner. And thank you to my wife too, to Kristen. When we got on the church planning track, they said she's basically going to have to sacrifice her personal desires for about 2 years and be willing to do whatever the church needs. And she's done it. And she's done it longer than 2 years. In a way that when I look at like people that are single that want to go into ministry, I'm like, I don't know how you're going to do it. Because it is so exhausting and you've been so wonderful. Thank you. But how do we collectively go forward? We go forward with you. It's not a collectively me. That's not what the word means. It means us. But there's also an individual ask too, right? When I was 23, that was 10 years ago now. It's frustrating. I can look back at what my mind was like as a Christian. I was a believer then, and the things that I did, and I say in 10 years, I hope I've matured a little bit. I hope I've said, Jesus, what areas of my life in this last 10 years do I need to submit to you? Keep doing your work in me. And then I also look forward to 10 years and go, I pray that that happens. And I believe that for us to look at what our future is going to be, you each have to be willing to ask the question, what area of my life am I not submitting to Jesus as my master? That's the word in the Bible. As my king, as my Lord. He is your master if you're in Christ. He has desires for how you're going to do everything for not just 172 hours, but if I could do math really quick, I'd say the minutes and the seconds. Every moment of your day, He cares. So are you willing to ask those questions? I don't want to ask Him about this. Are you willing to? And you can pray the same prayer Jeremiah prayed. He prayed that refiner's fire prayer. Don't do it too much, you're going to consume me. Just a little bit. Because I look back when I was 23, we were just back with our family. And my sister-in-law confessed, well, she pretty much told on me, to Kristen, that I was a punk. She said, he thought he was God's gift to mankind. I probably did. And they said one time all the kids, so I'm the youngest of 4 and all the kids were there. And it was like 8:30, which is super early if you don't have kids. If you don't have kids, it's like 3 hours after you've woken up. And they were all yelling outside my door. And I opened the door and I was like, can you quiet them down? And slammed the door and went back to bed. And now I have a 4-year-old and a 2-year-old. And I'm like, if I had a sibling that said that, I'd be like, I'm going to send them into your bed right now is what I would do. Right? But right, that was 10 years ago, and then I have a certain perception of being a parent now, and many of you are like, just wait, you know? And so in 10 more years, but it's not just like I understand kids, I understand my role as a child of Jesus who has the opportunity to have kids and steward them well. That's the question. Are you producing fruit in your own life? Are we producing fruit as a church? And we'll never, ever stop asking that question.